Have you ever done something kind without expecting anything in return? Just a simple act, like picking up a stranger's drop wallet on a busy sidewalk? Now, imagine that stranger turns out to be a CEO, and instead of just saying thank you, he gives you something that changes your entire life. Not just money, but purpose, a second chance, and maybe even love. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a real story about how one small moment can ripple out in ways we never imagined. It starts with a worn coat, a quiet girl named Elena, and a black leather wallet that slipped from someone's pocket one crisp autumn morning. What happened next? Well, it didn't just change her life, it rebuilt his. And it might just change the way you look at everyday kindness forever. So grab a cup of tea, find a quiet corner, and let me take you on a journey of chance encounters, hard choices, and the kind of love that doesn't begin with roses, but with doing the right thing when no one's watching. Let's begin. It was just a wallet, black leather, worn edges, nothing flashy. It slipped from the pocket of a man in a tailored suit as he stepped out of a sleek black car. Just another moment in the rush of a city morning. No one else noticed, but Elena did. She had been walking to work, her coat pulled tight around her and her lunchbox swinging gently in one hand. She was thinking about her brother Daniel, wondering if the soup she packed would be warm enough when the wallet fell. She didn't hesitate. She didn't check inside, didn't pause to wonder who he was, didn't look around to see if anyone was watching. She simply stepped forward, picked it up, and called out over the noise of the street, "Sir, you dropped your wallet." The man turned, surprised, maybe even a little confused. His eyes, sharp and clear, met hers, expecting perhaps a question or a demand. But all she did was hold it out with a gentle smile. "I just thought it was the right thing to do," she said. That's where it all began. It's funny, isn't it? How the smallest things, the kind that go unnoticed by everyone else, can change everything. We live in a world where people often chase big moments, big wins, big gestures. But real change, real stories, they often start with a whisper, not a shout. You see, returning a lost wallet seems like nothing, but it tells you everything about a person. It tells you that they act even when there's no reward, that they choose honesty even when no one's watching, that they value what's right over what's convenient. And that's rare. In fact, a study by the journal Science once tested how people responded to finding lost wallets in cities across the world. The surprising result? The more money the wallet had inside, the more likely people were to return it. Why? Because the act of returning something becomes more personal, more about identity when the stakes are higher. And those who did the right thing, especially when no one was looking, reported feeling more complete afterward. Not richer, not praised, just right. Elena didn't know that the man she helped was Liam Hayes, CEO of one of the biggest international firms in the city. She didn't know her kindness had interrupted a man drowning in pressure, disillusioned with power, and quietly losing faith in people. But that day, in the middle of honking horns, fogged-up car windows, and a world that didn't seem to notice small things anymore, she reminded him that goodness still existed, that people still noticed. And sometimes that's all it takes. A wallet returned, a look exchanged, a moment passed, and from that moment on, neither of their lives would be the same again, because what started as a small act of kindness was about to become the seed of something far greater. Now let's follow Liam back to his office, where something quiet had begun to shift. He couldn't stop thinking about her, and what happens next might surprise you. Liam Hayes was a man used to being watched. Everywhere he went, people noticed the cut of his suits, the brand of his shoes, the way his driver opened the door exactly 3 seconds after he stepped outside. In business meetings, he was met with eager nods. In restaurants, with quiet stares. At charity galas, with polite smiles from people who already Googled his net worth. But that morning, on that sidewalk, Elena didn't look at him like that. She looked at him like just a man, a stranger who had dropped something. And then she moved on. No flattery, no questions, no hint that she recognized him at all. Just a simple act, and a gaze so unbothered, so pure, that it echoed louder than applause. Back in his office, high above the city, behind a desk that cost more than most people's cars, Liam couldn't focus. He scrolled through emails, nodded through meetings, stared at charts and projections. But his mind kept returning to her. The girl in the faded coat. The girl who returned his wallet and disappeared through a cafe door like it was just another Tuesday. What was it about her? She had said almost nothing. But there was something in the way she had looked at him. Without expectation, without calculation. It was unsettling and comforting. You see, when you live in the upper echelons of success, people rarely see you. They see the title, the power, the money, the headlines. They talk to the version of you that's published in magazines, not the one who lies awake at night wondering what it's all really for. But Elena, she looked at him and didn't flinch, didn't flatter, didn't ask, and that stayed with him. It's a strange thing when someone sees you and doesn't want anything. It makes you curious, then cautious, then, if you're lucky, hopeful, because deep down, most of us are starving for realness, for someone who sees through the noise and still chooses kindness. And for Liam, who had built empires but forgotten what it felt like to be genuine, that moment felt like a hand reaching through fog. That night, he poured himself a glass of scotch, his usual routine. But instead of feeling powerful, he felt hollow. He looked around his spotless penthouse. Everything was in order. The furniture, the stock market, the silence, except his thoughts weren't quiet. He grabbed his coat, stepped into the night, and found himself back outside that little cafe. Closed now, dark inside. But down a side alley, he saw her. Through a lit window, she was laughing with a young man, her brother, though he didn't know that yet. The scene was simple: a couch, a smile, a dinner tray. And somehow, it hit him harder than any business deal ever had. He stood there a long while, then walked away, unsure why he'd come in the first place. But something had already shifted, because sometimes it takes being seen without a title to remember who you are underneath it. And sometimes one glance, one true look, can begin to rewrite a life. And so, Liam kept coming back, not to intrude, just to watch from a distance, to feel something real in a world that had long felt rehearsed. But while Liam watched, something else was about to happen. Elena was about to collapse. And this time, he wouldn't walk away. Let's talk about what happens when kindness meets exhaustion, and someone finally catches you before you fall. Not all stares are the same. Some eyes look at you to judge, some to compare, and some, rare and unmistakable, linger because they recognize something familiar. That's the kind of gaze Liam carried each time he passed by the cafe. He didn't enter, not at first. He'd pause across the street, pretend to check his phone, or sit in the back of his car with the window cracked just enough. He wasn't stalking. He wasn't plotting. He was watching, quietly, thoughtfully, trying to understand why he couldn't forget her. What he saw was not glamorous. Elena in her apron, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, pouring coffee, taking orders, smiling, even when a customer rolled her eyes or snapped at her for something she didn't cause. And yet, there was something calming about it, grounding, no pretense, no performance. She lived in a world where kindness wasn't part of a PR campaign. It was just part of her. That night, curiosity tugged harder. Liam took a different path, around the back of the cafe, down a narrow alley lit by one soft window. And there she was again, not a barista now, just a sister, barefoot on a worn rug, handing a bowl of soup to her younger brother. The room was small, cracked walls, flickering light, but there was laughter, real laughter. It hit him harder than any luxury he'd ever purchased, because in all his millions, Liam had never bought something that felt that honest. You see, when people are stripped of performance, when no one's looking, they show you who they really are. And if you're paying attention, those are the moments worth watching. Moments where love isn't loud but present, where exhaustion doesn't steal warmth, where life isn't perfect but still deeply human. In psychology, there's something called attunement. It's the ability to sense someone's emotional state, without them ever saying a word. Liam, trained in boardrooms, contracts, and negotiation, had never learned that skill. But in those few days watching Elena, he started to feel it. He could see when her smile was genuine and when it was a mask for pain. He noticed how she always gave her brother the bigger portion, how she walked home slower when it rained, maybe because she liked the quiet more than the rush. And perhaps most painfully, he noticed fatigue she carried, like someone who was always needed but rarely held. Sometimes the people who give the most are the ones carrying the heaviest burdens, and it's easy to overlook them until you really look. That's what Liam was beginning to do, and whether he admitted it or not, it was changing him. But one night, everything shifted. He didn't mean to be nearby, didn't expect to rush forward. But sometimes life doesn't wait for us to plan. Sometimes it simply collapses, and that's exactly what happened. Because the next time he saw her, she didn't smile, she didn't speak, she fell. Let's talk about what happens when the strongest one in the room finally breaks, and someone is there to catch her. It happened fast. One moment, Elena was locking the cafe door after a long double shift. The next, her knees gave out beneath her. No warning, no dramatic music, just the soft thud of a body too tired to stand and a man's arms catching her just in time. Liam hadn't meant to be there. He had told himself again that tonight he wouldn't come by, that watching from a distance had become a habit. He needed to break, but fate had other plans. Because in that moment, rain beginning to fall, the streetlights flickering overhead, he saw something he hadn't before. Kindness, when stretched too thin, breaks. He lifted her gently, her body light, her breath uneven. Her head rested against his chest as the rain soaked through both their coats. And then, in the faintest whisper, she said, "My brother, don't let my mother worry." Liam's breath caught. It wasn't just fatigue. It was something deeper. Wounds that lived under the surface. Old losses, unspoken fears, the kind of exhaustion that doesn't sleep off in a night. He carried her up the stairs of a modest apartment building. A teenage boy, wide-eyed and pale, opened the door. "Daniel," Liam said gently. "She's okay." She fainted. Together, they laid her on the couch. The cushion sagged. The light buzzed overhead. On the table, bills, medical papers, empty pill bottles. This was the world Elena kept standing through sheer will. And Liam? He stood in the doorway, silent, soaked, and stunned, because he had come to say thank you. But now he understood. She didn't just return a wallet. She had been giving everything, every day, and getting nothing in return but more weight to carry. Sometimes, the strongest people are the ones no one checks on, because they're always smiling, always capable, always the ones others lean on, until they can't, until their body gives out before their spirit does. The next day, Elena woke up slowly, her voice barely a whisper, eyes flickering open to find Liam still there, sitting quietly, coat draped over the back of a chair, his phone resting on his knee, untouched. She murmured a soft, "Thank you." He didn't speak. He just nodded, stayed, and in that stillness, something unspoken passed between them. A shift, a beginning. You see, most people think love begins with fireworks. But more often than not, it begins in moments like this. Moments when someone holds you, not because you asked, but because they showed up when you didn't even know you were falling. Later that day, Elena would face a far bigger collapse. Not her body, but her faith, her security, her entire sense of being able to protect the only person she had left. Because the very next morning, her brother would struggle to breathe. And this time, no amount of quiet strength could save him. It was going to take something she wasn't used to giving, asking for help. Let's talk about what happens when the one who always gives finally has to receive. The hospital lights were cold, too bright, too sterile. They buzzed faintly overhead as Elena stood frozen, her hands trembling, her breath caught between fear and desperation. Daniel, her little brother, her heart, had collapsed that morning with a high fever and shallow breaths. Complications from his condition, the doctors said. She had carried him down 3 flights of stairs, flagged down an ambulance, held his hand through the sirens. But now, standing in front of the billing counter. She faced a wall no strength could push through. The deposit is required up front for treatment to continue. She had nothing left to pawn, no savings, no family to call, and no more pride left to protect. Her hands fumbled for her phone. She stared at the screen for a long time, then slowly, carefully, scrolled through her contacts and stopped at one name, Liam. She almost didn't press call, because there's a unique pain in needing help when you spend your whole life being the help. Because the hardest thing for someone like Elena wasn't working 2 jobs or skipping meals or swallowing tears. It was this, needing someone. And not because she was weak, but because she had been strong for so long. She didn't know how to be anything else. She called anyway. Her voice cracked the moment he answered. I'm sorry to call. I know I shouldn't. I didn't know who else. Then silence. Then, it's Daniel. They won't treat him unless She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to, because Liam didn't ask for details, didn't hesitate, didn't wait. I'm on my way, he said. And 30 minutes later, he was at the hospital, still in the same clothes from a night before, walking straight to the front desk. No questions, no explanations. He gave his name. He gave his card. And within the hour, Daniel was moved to a private room with the best pediatric specialist in the city en route. Elena watched from a bench near the vending machines, her eyes wide, her body still shaking. She approached Liam slowly. You didn't have to do all that, she said, voice soft, uncertain. He turned, his expression unreadable. Yes, I did. You see, there's a quiet kind of love, not romantic, not loud, that lives in showing up. And Liam had spent a lifetime around people who talked. But Elena, she had never asked for anything. So the moment she did, he knew it mattered. This moment, this quiet collapse into vulnerability, is something so many of us face in different forms. The choice between pride and survival. The decision to ask for help, not because we want to, but because we must. And the truth is, asking for help is not weakness. It's trust. It's courage. It's choosing hope over silence. That day, something shifted between them, not because of what he gave, but because of what she allowed. She allowed someone in, and that's how healing begins. But Liam wasn't done yet. He didn't just want to pay a bill. He wanted to offer her something far more valuable, an opportunity to rebuild her life, not just survive it. And what he was about to offer would test Elena's belief in herself more than anything ever had before. Let's talk about what happens when someone finally sees her potential and gives you a door to walk through. Will you step into it? The invitation came quietly. No grand announcement. No flashy headlines. Just a simple conversation in the corner of a hospital hallway. There's a program, Liam said, his voice calm. Part of my foundation. A business incubator. For people with ideas, passion, but no opportunity. I think you'd be perfect for it. Elena blinked. Perfect? She didn't feel perfect. She felt exhausted, unsure, out of place. She had never taken a business class in her life. She barely had time to read, let alone build a future. But Liam wasn't offering charity. He was offering belief. You don't owe me anything, he added. Just show up and be willing to learn. And after a long pause, Elena said yes. The first day of class, Elena stood in front of a glass building with her thrifted blazer too big at the shoulders, her hair pulled back into a simple braid. Inside, sleek laptops, designer handbags, manicure hands tapping on phones, voices that seemed sure of themselves. And then there was her, holding a notebook filled with handwritten thoughts and a second-hand pen. She took a deep breath and walked in. Imposter syndrome isn't a buzzword. It's real. It's that voice in your head that whispers, you don't belong here. They'll find out you're fraud. You're not smart enough. Not polished enough. Not enough. Elena heard that voice every single day in that classroom. It echoed through sideways glances, through casual remarks like, you're the one the CEO personally recommended, right? As if to say, you didn't earn your place. It was given, so she kept her head down. She took notes, stayed late, listened more than she spoke. She helped a classmate who had mocked her just days before, because that's who she was, even if no one else saw it yet. We often mistake credentials for capability, but real strength doesn't always come with a degree. Sometimes it comes from having fought for every inch of ground beneath your feet, from showing up in a room where you feel invisible and choosing to stay anyway. Liam watched her quietly, from the back of the conference room, from his office above, from the security cameras he never used, except for her. He saw her struggle, and he saw her grow. He read her reports, saw her notes, noticed how she always asked thoughtful questions, especially when no one else dared to admit they were lost. And one Friday afternoon, after a particularly difficult week, he called her into his office. She stood nervously by the door, but Liam didn't lecture, didn't smile. He just leaned forward and said, "I've noticed your commitment, and I'd like you to join a special task force, a real-world project, hands-on, direct, and important." Elena's eyes widened. "Why me?" His reply was simple. "Because the world needs more people like you in rooms where decisions are made." And just like that, she wasn't just a student anymore. She was a builder, a contributor, a voice. And the next step in her journey would take her far from glass buildings and polished hallways. It would take her into the heart of real struggle, where ideas met dirt roads and where change meant rolling up your sleeves. Because the next chapter, it wasn't theory anymore. It was life. Let's talk about what happens when you stop studying change and start creating it. They stood on a dusty hillside, boots sinking slightly into dry earth. It wasn't a conference room. There were no air conditioners humming, no polished floors, just sun-scorched ground, scattered farming tools, and the quiet resilience of a village that had survived more than it ever complained about. Elena rolled up her sleeves. She wasn't here to observe. She was here to serve. This was her new assignment, a field project through Foundation, a real-world task force focused on sustainable food storage for remote, low-income communities. No slideshows, no business buzzwords, just people and problems that mattered. She listened to a farmer who had lost half his crops to rot last season, to a grandmother storing rice in plastic bins sealed with tape, to a teenager who dreamed of designing better tools but had never seen a 3D printer. Elena didn't pretend to know the answers, but she asked, and more importantly, she stayed long enough to hear. At night, the team pitched tents near a quiet stream. Most of the others turned in early, faces buried in reports and data. But Elena couldn't sleep, so she sat outside by the fire, knees pulled to her chest, eyes reflecting the flames. Moments later, Liam appeared, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, quiet, steady, unchanged. He sat beside her, not saying anything at first. Then, softly, "It's quieter out here than I expected." She smiled, peaceful. They sat in silence for a while. Just the crackle of fire, the rustle of dry leaves, the whisper of water over stone. Then Liam spoke again, but this time it was personal. "You know, I grew up in foster care. 5 homes before I turned 16. Elena turned, startled. He nodded slowly. "I hated silence back then. It meant people were about to leave." She looked down, swallowed hard. "I used to dream of being a writer," she said. "But then Mom got sick. Daniel needed me. Survival became the story." They didn't say much more that night, but somewhere between their shared silences and small truths, something shifted, not just between them, but within them, because helping others had opened something neither of them had expected. Healing. There's a powerful truth in doing meaningful work with your own hands. When you touch the soil, when you learn a name, when you listen, not to reply, but to understand, that's when transformation begins. Not just for the people you're helping, but for you, too. By the end of the week, Elena had drafted a prototype idea. Simple, affordable, scalable. One of the farmers clapped when she explained it. That, he said, could save us. And for the first time, Elena didn't just feel capable. She felt called. But what neither of them knew was that their quiet, humble work was about to become very public. Because somewhere out there, someone had taken a photo, a grainy image of 2 people by a campfire, hands intertwined, Heads lean close. And that one photo would ignite a media storm that threatened to undo everything they had built and everything they had begun to feel. Let's talk about what happens when privacy is shattered, intentions are questioned, and the world decides to watch. The photo wasn't meant to be anything, just a blurry snapshot from a distance. Elena and Liam sitting by a fire, heads tilted together, hands gently intertwined beneath a sky full of stars. It looked tender. It was. But to the outside world, it became something else entirely. By dawn, the image had been posted online, captioned with rumors, fueled by speculation. By noon, it was on every major blog and business news site. CEO Liam Hayes involved with intern from cafe job. Power, privilege, and favoritism? From coffee counter to company strategy. Who is Elena Moore? Within hours, Elena's phone buzzed nonstop. Comments, messages, assumptions, some curious, some cruel. At the cafe where she had once worked, the place where she had smiled through exhaustion, where regulars knew her name, people stared differently now. Her manager pulled her aside, apologetic, uneasy. I'm sorry, Elena, the attention, the press, customers are uncomfortable. We have to let you go. Just like that, she lost her safe place. Not because she did anything wrong, but because the world made her story louder than she ever asked it to be. And when she stepped outside, the cameras were waiting. Miss Moore, are you sleeping with your boss? Did you plan this in the start? Are you the reason Hayes is diverting company resources? She didn't respond. She couldn't. The world spun. Her chest tightened. And for the first time in a long time, she felt small again. Meanwhile, across the city, the boardroom at Hayes International pulsed with tension. Liam sat at the head of the table, calm on the surface, but burning beneath. This relationship is a liability, one board member warned. Our investors are nervous. The stock dropped 4% this morning. End it, or we consider replacing you. He listened, expression unreadable. But inside, something cracked. You see, the world is quick to punish women for being chosen, especially if the chooser is powerful. And the woman? Ordinary, real, human. Elena never asked to be anyone's headline. But now she was, not because she was loud, but because someone saw her worth, and the world decided that was too much. And maybe you felt that too. Maybe you've loved someone and had others whisper. Maybe you worked hard and been told it was luck or connections. Maybe you've had your story stolen by people who only ever read the headline. That evening, Elena sat alone beneath a willow tree in the park. Eyes red, heart raw. She hadn't returned Liam's calls. She didn't know how. Then footsteps. He came to her quietly, his coat still open, his face searching hers. They took everything from me today, she whispered. My job, my privacy, my name, and now they want to give me up too. He looked at her, long and steady. But when she asked him the question that mattered most, what do you want? He didn't answer right away. So she kept going. If loving you means disappearing, I'll do it. If that protects you, I'll go. Her voice shook, but her words stood tall. And that's when Liam crossed a space between them, took her face in his hands, and said the words that changed everything. No, you don't disappear. Not ever. I'm not losing you. I don't care what it costs, the board, the company, my name. I'll burn it all if that's what it takes to keep you. Because sometimes love isn't poetic. Sometimes it's defiant. Sometimes it says, let the world misunderstand. But I will not let go. And that moment, it wasn't just a declaration. It was a decision. Because the next morning, Liam Hayes would walk away from everything he built to build something better. With her, let's talk about what happens when love stops whispering and finally chooses to speak, no matter who's listening. There was no press conference, no speech, no staged apology, no spin, just a quiet internal memo that made its way through the corridors of Hayes International. Effective immediately, Mr. Liam Hayes will transition from Chief Executive Officer to Senior Strategic Advisor. The board thanks him for his years of visionary leadership. The business world scrambled. Investors speculated. Analysts debated. But Liam didn't explain. Because when your heart finally knows what it wants, you stop explaining and start choosing. He had built an empire, negotiated billion-dollar deals, spoken on stages beside presidents. But when the people in that boardroom asked him to choose between love and legacy, he didn't hesitate. He chose her, not because it was easy, but because it was true. You see, real love doesn't ask you to shrink. It asks you to stand. And sometimes to stand alone. Liam's decision wasn't about romance. It was about values, about the kind of man he wanted to be when no one was watching. He walked away from the corner office, from press briefings and quarterly calls, from a seat of power that so many chase and so few ever question. But Liam, he had learned something Elena had known all along. The most powerful position you can hold is beside someone you believe in. In the weeks that followed, they disappeared from the spotlight. While headlines faded and gossip blogs moved on, they were busy converting an abandoned library on the west side of the city into something new, something shared, something built not on profit, but on purpose. They called it the Compass Initiative, a center for youth education, entrepreneurship, and social impact. It was Elena's dream, fueled by Liam's support, and carried forward by the hands of people who knew what it felt like to be underestimated. Each day was simple. Elena brewed coffee in the community kitchen. Liam coached students in the upstairs workshop. They ate lunch with teenagers who had never been believed in, listened to wild ideas with open hearts, stayed late on worn-out couches, reviewing business plans scribbled in notebooks. They didn't talk much about what they gave up, because every time they looked around, at the shelves lined with books, the sound of laughter in the hallway, the joy of a student receiving their first customer payment, they knew they hadn't lost a thing. Love doesn't always ask you to give up the world, but sometimes it asks you to build a new one, together, from the ground up, and that's exactly what they did. Soon, the first class of the Compass Initiative was preparing to graduate. 27 students, each with a different story. Some formerly incarcerated, some single parents, some once homeless. Now, they were launching food trucks, nonprofits, apps, local co-ops, all because one woman chose to return a wallet, and one man chose to not walk away. But before those students walked across the stage, Liam had one more surprise. Not for them, for her. Let's talk about how love, when it finally finds its voice, asks the simplest, most powerful question of all. Will you marry me? The house wasn't grand. White shutters slightly peeled by the salt air. Lavender growing wild along the fence. Wooden steps that creaked when you carried groceries home. But it was theirs. Perched on a quiet stretch of land where the forest met the sea, it didn't have high ceilings or marble counters. What it had was something better. Peace. Elena stood barefoot in the garden, the morning sun brushing gold across her shoulders. She bent to clip a bundle of rosemary, her toes sinking into soft earth. And from inside the house came the sweetest sound, a baby's laughter. She looked up. Liam was walking toward her, barefoot too, with their daughter wrapped in his arms. Her tiny fingers tangled in his shirt collar, her curls a perfect echo of Elena's. "Mama," the little girl giggled, reaching out. Elena smiled wide, lifting her into her arms. "There's my sunshine." Liam leaned in, kissing them both on the forehead. "She refused a nap until she saw you. She's got your fire," Elena teased, "or your stubbornness." He laughed. Same thing. Inside the house, life lived fully. Finger paintings on the fridge, books stacked beside coffee mugs, a worn-out typewriter on the desk, Elena's second book in progress, and on a small shelf above it, a single glass case. Inside it, the wallet, the same one she had picked up on a street corner all those years ago. She had found it again while unpacking boxes in the attic. She brought it downstairs, set it on the table. Liam looked up from rocking their daughter. "Where did you find that?" "In the attic," she said softly. "I didn't know you kept it." He stood, walked over, turned it over in his hands. "Worn. Familiar. I meant to throw it away 100 times," he said. "But Something always stopped me. She traced a finger along the leather edge. It's strange, isn't it? Everything because of something so small. He looked at her with that same quiet intensity as the day they met. You thought you were giving back my wallet, he said, but what you really did was hand me back my heart. She laughed through tears. That sounds dangerously like something I'd write. Then maybe you should, he whispered, because the truth is, sometimes life doesn't turn on the big things. It turns on the little ones. A pause, a choice, a single act of goodness no one asked for, but someone never forgot. On weekends, they walked to the local farmer's market, holding hands like teenagers. They still ran the Compass Initiative, though now, Elena was the one giving the speeches. They mentored, they planted, they listened, and in the evenings after their daughter fell asleep, they sat by the fire, sipping tea, and smiling at the silence that once felt so terrifying. Now it felt like home. The life they built wasn't perfect, but it was good, and it was real, and all of it, traced back to one moment on a sidewalk when a woman chose to do the right thing, even though no one was watching. So, if you're wondering whether small kindness matters, if you're questioning whether a single choice can ripple out beyond what you see, let this story remind you, the heart you help might be the heart you end up keeping. Hot beverage if the story touched you. Share it with someone who believes in doing good, even when it's hard. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Mr. Michael stories. Because sometimes the smallest acts lead to the biggest lives. Yellow Heart.